and the Israeli state submits reports and documents, and NGOs in Israel who are part of the UN kind of NGO system can also submit reports and documentation, and then the committee produces its conclusions. Okay, and it's a periodical review of to what extent that country is meeting requirements of the convention and anti-racial laws, etc. Okay, so the report in March 2012 about Israel used language that has been described by experts on this whole committee set up on the elimination of discrimination as unprecedented. Unprecedented also in the sense that this UN committee, like quite a lot of UN committees, wants to promote a kind of policy of engagement with the state actor, right? Like it doesn't want to kind of just go in and condemn this or that willy-nilly, like it wants to sort of promote this process of engagement and change, if you know what I mean. But by this stage, because there's been a number of periodic reviews, the committee got so frustrated, not only with the Israeli government's, Israeli state's lack of desire to change fundamental issues, but even getting worse. And this is the sort of language they use, okay? Segregation, quote, segregation between Jewish and non-Jewish communities, lack of equal access to land and property, that's inside the pre-67 borders, right, inside good democratic Israel. Regime of, quote, de facto segregation in the West Bank, severe enough to prompt a reminder by the committee of the prohibition of apartheid. Okay, that's the first time that committee has talked about apartheid since South Africa. That's why, despite it being like a not particularly headline-grabbing or exciting development, I encourage people to look that report up and to use it as a resource. I hope you can see those two pictures okay. I use these two pictures in quite a lot of presentations because for me they illustrate something very important, which I hope has come across as I've talked about a lot of different Israeli policies. I don't think anybody here can tell me which one of those photos took place in the pre-67 area and in the occupied territories. Because what's taking place is effectively the same. The picture on the left I took myself, and it's in the Jordan Valley in the occupied West Bank. And a Palestinian family's agricultural structure has been demolished. And on the picture on the right, not taken by me, is a Palestinian woman, citizen of Israel in this case, sitting outside of a home that's been demolished in Nakab, in the Negev in the south. Two demolitions. In the case on the left, the Palestinians don't have Israeli citizenship, they're under military occupation. The case on the right, the woman and the family have got Israeli citizenship. But the same goal is being advanced, which is crushing Palestinian communities, preventing Palestinian communities from being able to grow or even potentially survive in their location, while at the same time making sure that Jewish communities, either nearby, or in some cases planned on top of, future potential Jewish communities, are growing and encouraged and thrive, etc. So what you're looking at nowadays, regardless of what will happen, is a de facto one state. Okay, so you've got between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River a de facto one state controlled by the Israeli government, and there's about 12 million people there who are granted or denied rights and privileges on a variety of levels, but on a discriminatory basis. Okay, the Israeli government rules and controls over all of the Palestinians and all of the Jews within that area. Some of whom are citizens, some of whom are not, and who kind of are afforded access to land and natural resources, etc., on a discriminatory basis. And of course, millions more are excluded from that area, from that territory altogether. So not citizens, they're not physically present, their property has still not been returned to them, and only because they're Palestinian. Only because they're Palestinian. So what you have is you have a regime that quite simply is designed to maintain the domination of one group at the expense of another group. That's why people feel that it's perfectly appropriate to talk about Israeli policies towards Palestinians in terms of apartheid, in terms of colonialism, and of course in terms of military occupation too. A few concluding thoughts, which I hope will be important or interesting for you in terms of analysis and also in terms of your own discussions on campus too. I'll just read this off for a second. Resist attempts to fence off debate about Israel's right to be a Jewish state. Okay, so what has happened in the last few years is that there's been increasing discussion about Israel's right to be a Jewish state, and that's come from different directions. So from the Israeli government side, Olmert, Netanyahu, they've advanced a position that says the Palestinians, and this is, in this context, he's talking about negotiations with the PA, together, saying that they must recognise Israel as a Jewish state. Like, I'm sure you must have seen that in news coverage of like demands of Netanyahu, whatever, for the peace talks. That for any final solution, any final resolution of the conflict, Palestinians must recognise Israel as a Jewish state. But this debate is also, or this discussion has also emerged in the context of some people talking about how what might be happening is not only the development of a de facto one state, but actually the death of the so-called two-state solution. And therefore it makes you question, well, okay, if there's not going to be an Israeli Jewish state and a Palestinian state, what is there going to be instead? And if it is a single democratic state, or if it's a kind of binational state, what does that mean for Israel's Jewish character? Okay? But when you talk about this subject, it's very common, until now, for people to try and make the discussion about Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state off limits, or a kind of red line. Okay? That came up in the news yesterday, because Chuck Hagel, the guy who Obama is appointing, right, within the context of the White House defense policy, he's been criticised. I don't really want to get into this because it's a bit boring, and they're all imperialists anyway. But he's been criticised by some people for apparently having a weaker position. Again, it's all relative in the US context. A weaker position on Israel and Iran, etc. But he himself wrote in a book of his, which were remarks that were then kind of publicised yesterday, that any resolution between Israel and the Palestinians has to include, any Middle East peace agreement, has to include Israel's, protect and preserve Israel's Jewish identity. And if you want to think about it in another way, it's a very low cost exercise for a modern British politician to criticise settlement building. Okay, I mean even the Foreign Office, William Hague, will do that regularly. Like, I'm pretty sure they just copy and paste the same thing every time they want to make a statement about the settlements. You know, it's regrettable, it's unfortunate, I just stubbed my toe, that was kind of unlucky. You know, it's just kind of stuff like that. And it's the same stuff all the time. No big deal. Israeli settlements nowadays, almost everybody accepts their, I mean, okay, their illegality in international law has been established for a long time, but there's no cost for people to criticise Israeli settlements. But there would be a very high political cost for any politician who stood up and said, you know what, I don't believe Israel has got any right to exist as a Jewish state, because that means the exclusion of the Palestinian refugees, systematic discrimination against Palestinians with citizenship, as well as you know, what it means for Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza Strip with regards to allocation of land and natural resources. Okay? Because that is still a taboo topic. And the Israeli government and Israel lobby groups talk about it in terms of delegitimization. And they talk about it from the point of view of that being the kind of red line. You know, Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state is paramount. But it must be clear, okay, if that's your position, but it must be clear that what that means for the Palestinians is exactly what I was just saying. It means it's rubber stamping the ethnic cleansing of '48. It's saying that it's okay for Palestinian refugees to be denied their right to return just because they're not Jewish. And it means the discriminatory allocation of resources within whatever territory Israel's controlling. And instead, people should be, my suggestion is, people should be pushing a future that is actually based on a genuine coexistence of equals. Okay? Not a fake coexistence that keeps colonial power structures intact. Okay? Not a coexistence that means that a Palestinian has to get a permit to go and smoke argila with some Israeli guy and then to go back to his ghetto in Bantustan at the end of the day. Okay? It means a coexistence based on equality. And it means thinking about self-determination that doesn't mean exclusion and you there and us here, in a way dominated, of course, by the Israeli state. It means self-determination. That means two people are sharing the same land, are expressing and having their identity in the same space, but not at the expense of another. If you're trying to escape, I don't think it matters you walk in front of the camera.
That's fine.
And these are the things that I think we should be focusing on, right? Rights, equality, democratization, and decolonization. You've got to ask people to oppose that. If they're going to defend the status quo and the continuation of the status quo, it means opposing those things. That's the basis of the Palestinian struggle. And okay, I did have time to mention a bit of it briefly. And what that can mean as options of response for people, including students, it's answering the call of Palestinian civil society to use strategies, that's what they are, strategies of boycott, strategies of divestment, calling on governments to use sanctions, as a way of pressuring Israel to comply with international norms. That's all BDS is. It's strategies to that can't be used in isolation, like BDS has to be working with other factors, most notably Palestinian political decisions. But BDS is simply a strategy that Palestinians have called for to be used by people outside as a way of asking for and enforcing implementation of international law. I'm not going to go into any specifics because if people want to go into that in questions, that's fine. So I'll stop there and throw it open for Q&A.
Thank you.